At my graduation party, I noticed my father slipping something into my glass of champagne. Smiling, I got up, walked over to my sister, and handed her the drink. She drank it, the one that was meant for me. Graduation day was supposed to feel like an ending, or maybe a beginning. Instead, it felt like a performance I'd already seen too many times. The garden behind our house was filled with guests, glitter, champagne, and the kind of polite laughter that hides everything real. My father stood near the buffet, holding court as usual, telling stories that somehow always ended with him as the hero. My mother orbited around him like a planet that had forgotten its own gravity. My sister, younger by 3 years, was the bright one, the one he called his second chance. I'd learned long ago how to smile in his presence, small, calculated, just enough to avoid confrontation. Every gesture with him was a negotiation of power, of image, of silence. When people congratulated me, he cut in before I could respond. "We're so proud," he said, placing a hand on my shoulder as if the word "we" erased me. He always did that, turned my moments into his validation. And I let him, because that was the deal. I'd play the obedient son, he'd pretend to love me. But underneath that arrangement, something had been shifting for months. Small, imperceptible things, a missing envelope from the university's finance office, whispers between him and my mother that stopped when I entered the room, his constant insistence that I didn't need to worry about the paperwork. At first, I thought it was paranoia. He'd always been controlling, but never careless. Then came that subtle change in tone, the way he'd say, "You've done so well, son. I'm almost jealous." And hold the word jealous just a little too long. That afternoon, under the sunlight and the camera flashes, I told myself it was nothing. Just another family performance, another mask to wear for one more day. The music played, people toasted, and I tried to convince myself that the unease in my stomach was just nerves, not instinct. Later, when the champagne was poured and everyone cheered, I saw it. A quick motion, subtle, almost invisible, my father's hand, his thumb pressing against the rim of my glass before sliding away. He smiled at me, the same way he always smiled when he thought he'd won. That smile should have been my warning. But I only understood its meaning when it was already too late. Little did I know, that moment would mark the end of who I used to be. That night, the laughter faded slower than the music. By the time the last guests left, the air was heavy with champagne and exhaustion. My mother hummed as she gathered glasses, my father stayed outside, finishing a cigar under the garden lights, and my sister, bright, careless, glowing from attention, kept replaying videos from the evening. I remember thinking how peaceful it looked. Almost normal. Almost. When she suddenly stopped talking mid-sentence and pressed a hand to her stomach, I didn't react right away. She laughed, brushed it off, said it was just too much cake. 5 minutes later, she was in the bathroom, vomiting. 10 minutes later, she fainted. Everything after that became noise. My mother's voice screaming her name, my father's shoes thudding across the floor, the clatter of dishes falling. I remember standing there, frozen, holding the same champagne glass. Empty now, marked with fingerprints I hadn't noticed before. At the hospital, they called it a mild toxic reaction. The doctors asked what she had eaten. My father handled the talking, calm and rehearsed. "Just the buffet food," he said, "and some champagne. She's allergic to preservatives." He smiled at them like a man explaining something trivial. I stood behind him, silent, my mind flicking through fragments. His hand on my glass, the faint chemical smell I'd dismissed as disinfectant, his look when I gave it to her. Was it fear? Or something closer to shock? When he turned to me later, outside the ER, his face was perfectly composed. "She's fine," he said. "Don't make a big deal out of this." His tone carried that old warning, the one that meant don't ask questions you don't want answered. But I couldn't stop replaying it. That tiny moment, that look, and the way his thumb had lingered on the glass, as if measuring something invisible. The doctors discharged her the next morning. They said her system had traces of an unidentifiable sedative, probably a mix-up at the catering company. He nodded, thanked them, paid the bill in cash, and told us never to mention it again. "We don't want to ruin your big day with gossip," he said. That sentence stuck to my ribs like a shard of glass. In the car, my sister was half asleep, pale, her head on my shoulder. My mother kept whispering prayers under her breath. And he drove, calm, silent, humming the same tune he always did when things went exactly as he planned. At home, he went straight to his office and locked the door. I sat in the kitchen, listening to the faint metallic click of the lock. Something inside me shifted. Not fear. Not yet. Just a quiet, surgical kind of curiosity. The kind that cuts deeper the more you try to ignore it. I poured water into the glass she'd used at the party. The one I'd handed her. The one he'd touched. The surface shimmered under the kitchen light, innocent and ordinary. But I could swear, even after washing it 3 times, that it still carried the faintest trace of something metallic. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his smile. And every time I woke up, I heard his words. Don't make a big deal out of this. It was almost funny how much I'd trusted that tone all my life. How easily I'd mistaken control for care. But somewhere between midnight and dawn, the unease turned into resolve. If there was a truth behind that glass, I was going to find it. Because the look in his eyes when she drank, that wasn't shock. It was disappointment. And that should have been my first red flag. For the next few days, the house operated on a strange kind of silence. The kind that pretends nothing happened. My sister recovered quickly. Youth has a way of forgiving what the mind refuses to process. She joked about that cursed buffet and went back to her phone. My mother avoided eye contact. My father? He acted lighter than I'd seen him in years, as if some invisible burden had finally been lifted. He whistled in the mornings, made breakfast, asked about my job search, all with that same immaculate tone, fatherly, warm, rehearsed. But under the surface, something didn't add up. His gestures felt off, like lines in a play delivered half a beat too late. On the 3rd night, I found myself in the hallway outside his study. The door was slightly open, a thin line of light cutting through the darkness. Inside, I could hear the soft rustle of paper, then a drawer closing. He didn't notice me watching. When he left a few minutes later, I waited for his footsteps to fade, then slipped inside. The air smelled of cologne and dust. His desk was perfectly organized, every pen aligned, every document stacked by size. It was the kind of order that exists only when someone has something to hide. I opened the top drawer. Bills, insurance forms, property deeds. Nothing unusual. Second drawer, sealed envelopes, medical notes with handwriting I didn't recognize. And then, near the bottom, a small plastic bottle. No label, just a white cap and a faint residue of powder at the rim. For a moment, I stood there frozen, pulse pounding in my ears. The logical part of me whispered, it's vitamins, allergy medicine, something harmless. But the rest of me, the part that still remembered that metallic smell, knew better. I set it down carefully, too scared to open it, and flipped through the papers beneath. One page caught my eye, an email printout, faintly crumpled, addressed to a Dr. Hayes. Subject line, alternative compound, no traceable benzodiazepine markers. My throat went dry. The message body was short, almost casual. Same dosage as before. Delivery under different label. Cash as usual. The date was 2 weeks before the graduation. That was the first time I felt real fear. Not for myself, for the realization that whatever he'd done, it wasn't spontaneous. It was planned. He'd been thinking about it long before that night. I heard movement upstairs, his footsteps again. I quickly placed everything back the way I'd found it. Even the angle of the papers, the alignment of the pens. I barely made it to my room before the study door opened. He lingered in the hallway for a moment. Then came that soft knock. Still awake? Yeah, I said, trying to sound half asleep. Good. Don't forget, we've got the family dinner Saturday. Be ready to make a toast. His tone was perfectly normal. Too normal. I waited until his steps disappeared again before letting out the breath I'd been holding. Sitting on my bed, I stared at my phone, scrolling through contact lists. Police? No. What could I even tell them? That my father might have poisoned me because I think I saw him touch a glass. They'd laugh. He was respected, generous, connected. And I was just the son who imagines too much. I opened a search bar and typed the first line from the email. Alternative compound. No traceable benzodiazepine markers. Results flooded the screen. Experimental sedatives, black market tranquilizers, memory inhibitors. My hand started shaking. It wasn't just meant to harm. It was meant to erase. That's when I noticed something else in the email footer, a file reference. H. 2023, plan.pdf. I searched his computer. Password protected, of course. 3 attempts locked me out. By then my heartbeat was so loud I thought he'd hear it through the walls. I closed everything, cleared the search history, sat back in the dark. For the first time in my life, I realized I was living in a house built entirely on secrets, and one of them had almost killed me. Still, a part of me kept hoping there was another explanation. Maybe I'd misunderstood. Maybe paranoia was hereditary. But then my phone buzzed. A new email. No sender, just a subject line. You shouldn't have looked. The message disappeared 5 seconds after I opened it. No sender, no trace in my inbox, not even in deleted items. Just a flash of words and then, nothing. But I'd read enough to know it was real. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I kept replaying that single line. You shouldn't have looked. Whoever sent it knew what I'd done, knew where I'd been, maybe even watched me do it. And if that was true, then my father wasn't just dangerous, he was careful. At dawn, I slipped out of the house. The streets were empty, the air sharp with early morning cold. I walked for blocks until I reached a small cafe near the old pharmacy, a place he'd never go. I ordered coffee just to have something to hold, something to keep my hands from shaking. I opened my laptop, logged in through a proxy, and ran data recovery on my email. One ghost entry came back, timestamped 2 minutes before midnight. It wasn't a normal email. It was routed through an encrypted relay, one used by corporations or, sometimes, by people who didn't want to be traced. The metadata listed only one device ID, the same one registered to my father's phone. That was when the denial started to die. I didn't want to believe it. I wanted it to be some awful coincidence, maybe a technical glitch, maybe a hacker using his address. But deep down, I already knew. I needed something concrete, something physical. When I got back home, he was in the garden trimming roses, humming that same off-key tune. He looked up, smiled like nothing had ever happened. You're up early. Couldn't sleep, I said. His eyes lingered on me for a moment, calm, unreadable, then went back to the roses. The thorns caught his fingers, a small cut, a drop of blood. He didn't even flinch. Later that afternoon, while he showered, I went back into his office. This time I was ready. I'd brought a small flash drive with a portable keylogger, and I planted it neatly behind the keyboard panel. I told myself I just wanted to confirm the truth, but the truth was, I wanted to catch him failing. I wanted to see fear in his eyes the way I'd felt it in mine. For 2 days, nothing. Then, on the third night, I checked the drive. Among dozens of mundane logins, banking, news sites, emails, one line stopped me cold. File accessed. 2023, plan, a.pdf. I pulled it. The password had been captured automatically. When I opened it, I almost wished I hadn't. The document wasn't long. Just 3 pages. Page 1, a summary of behavioral deterioration, my own, listed like a medical report, as if you were documenting a patient. Phrases like increasing independence, uncontrolled defiance, ideation of separation. Page 2, proposed intervention steps, temporary sedation, memory suppression, emergency psychiatric admission. Page 3, authorization notes. At the bottom, a signature line. His name. It wasn't just an attempt to harm me. It was a plan to erase me, piece by piece, and call it treatment. My head spun. It explained everything. The sedative, the secrecy, the obsession with control. He'd meant to drug me, make me collapse at the party, and then present it as a nervous breakdown in front of witnesses. The perfect narrative. Brilliant but unstable son. He'd sign the papers, commit me, and no one would question it. But I'd switched the glasses. And now he didn't know what I knew. My breathing turned shallow. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. Somewhere upstairs, a floorboard creaked, slow, deliberate. I closed the laptop, hid the drive under the carpet, and forced myself to move. He was standing in the doorway, towel over his shoulder, smile too casual. Looking for something? My mouth went dry. Just notes for work. He nodded slowly, studying my face. You know, he said, you've seemed distracted lately. Everything okay? Yeah. Good. Keep it that way. He turned and walked away, humming again. When he was gone, I let out the breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. My hands were trembling, my heart hammering so hard I could hear it in my teeth. That night, I backed up the file to 3 different encrypted drives. One hidden in my backpack, one in a cloud account under a fake name, one printed, sealed in an envelope, taped under the drawer of my desk. Because whatever this was, it wasn't just a family problem anymore. It was a war, and the next move would be mine. But before I could act, Something happened that changed everything I thought I knew about him. For 2 days I watched him. Not openly, just small glances, quiet observations. He moved like a man who had nothing to fear. That terrified me more than anything. He laughed at breakfast, complimented my mother's cooking, asked my sister about her internship. Every gesture was precise, controlled, polished. Only once did his hand tremble, just slightly, when he poured coffee. And my mother noticed. Her eyes flicked to the shake, then to me, then away again. That single glance told me she knew something. That night, when the house fell silent, I found her in the kitchen rinsing cups. The hum of the dishwasher covered our voices. "Mom," I said quietly, "what's going on with him?" She didn't answer right away, just kept washing, shoulders tight. "You're tired," she whispered finally. "Don't start inventing things again." I saw his files. Her hand stopped. The water kept running. When she turned, her face looked smaller somehow, years of denial collapsing inward. "Then you shouldn't have looked," she said. The same phrase, word for word. It wasn't coincidence. He'd told her. Or worse, she'd helped. "How long have you known?" "Please," she said softly. "You don't understand your father. He just wants what's best." "For who?" "For all of us." I almost laughed. "He tried to drug me. He made a mistake." "A mistake?" She closed her eyes, voice shaking. "He thought you'd leave. He can't lose you like he lost his brother." I froze. His brother. A name I hadn't heard since childhood. Uncle Daniel, the ghost relative, erased from every photo, every story. What happened to him? "An accident," she said automatically. Then quieter, "A breakdown." I waited. She looked at me, tears trembling but never falling. "He was going to expose something. Your father stopped him before he destroyed the family." Those words landed like cold iron. It wasn't protection, it was precedent. My father didn't destroy threats, he managed them. Tidy, efficient, untraceable. "And you helped him then too?" I asked. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. "You don't know what he's capable of." "I'm starting to." Silence stretched between us. The dishwasher beeped. End of cycle. She turned it off, dried her hands carefully, like performing a ritual. "Whatever you think you know," she whispered, "you can't fight him. He plans for everything." "So did I said. Her eyes widened, a flicker of real fear. For a moment she looked like she might warn him. Then something shifted, fatigue, shame, maybe guilt. She reached into her apron pocket, pulled out a small silver USB. "He keeps backups," she said. "One in the safe, one in the car, one here." "Why are you giving me this?" "Because," she said, voice trembling, "I don't want another accident." She walked away before I could thank her or accuse her. I plugged the drive into my laptop upstairs. It was encrypted, but the password was handwritten on a folded note. Revelation. Biblical irony wasn't his strong suit. Inside were folders labeled by year, 2018 to 2023. Each contained reports, people, names, amounts, family fund transfers, behavioral records, incident logs. At first glance it looked like bookkeeping. But buried deep, in 2019, was a folder marked Project Solace. Dozens of videos, home footage, therapy transcripts, even voice recordings. Every file opened with the same voice memo. Subject shows resistance to correction. Phase 2 required. The subjects were family. My mother, my sister, me. He'd been recording us for years. Monitoring, categorizing, adjusting. Every argument, every hesitation, filed, time-stamped, analyzed. The last entry was from a week before graduation. Subject A expresses intent to move out permanently. Intervention imminent. That was me. The anger that hit wasn't loud. It was surgical. Precise. I copied every file, backed them up twice, encrypted them again. If he wanted control, I'd give him chaos. From downstairs came the faint creak of the study door. I froze. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Then his voice, casual through the dark. "You're still awake, aren't you?" I closed the laptop, heart pounding, stood near the door. The handle turned, once, twice, but didn't open. A pause. Then his whisper, almost kind. "Sleep well, son. Big day tomorrow." The door clicked shut. His steps faded. I leaned against the wall, breath shaking. Tomorrow. Something was coming. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of him. I was ready. Because this time, the experiment would study him. I didn't sleep that night either. Not from fear anymore, from noise. The kind that lives inside your head. replaying every second you can't undo. The glass. Her laughter. Her hand pressing to her stomach. It had been meant for me, but she drank it. And every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, pale under hospital lights. Revenge was supposed to feel righteous. Instead, it felt surgical, and I was the incision. I sat at my desk, the files open again, staring at my father's notes like a scientist reading his own diagnosis. Every line about me was technically true, just twisted enough to sound insane if I ever tried to deny it. He'd built the perfect narrative. Obedient son cracks under pressure, turns paranoid, accuses family. Classic case study, self-fulfilling prophecy. He hadn't needed to poison me to win. He'd only needed to make me look crazy. But now I had evidence, years of it, and a witness, even if she was too scared to speak. I had the truth. And truth, I realized, was useless unless you made people see it. That became the plan. Not escape. Exposure. I started small, creating duplicate folders with simplified names, copies of copies on hidden drives. I cataloged the most damning files, recordings of his voice, timestamps, the Project Solace documents. I drafted letters to journalists I'd never send, wrote outlines for statements I'd never make. Every scenario ended the same way, with him smiling while I looked unhinged. He'd twist any accusation into a symptom. He'd done it before, so I shifted approach. If he wanted a performance, I'd give him one. A son unraveling, publicly, controllably, until he underestimated me. For 3 days, I rehearsed the role. Silence, distance, slight, erratic gestures. I avoided meals, stayed in my room, deleted messages mid-conversation. Enough to make him confident I was slipping. Enough to draw him out. Each night, I heard him moving. The soft creak of the hallway, the click of his office door, sometimes a shadow lingering by my own. He thought he was hunting me. He didn't realize I was already documenting every step. But the guilt, it didn't fade. Every time I heard my sister laugh, something twisted inside me. She still had faint bruises on her arm from the fall. Still thought it was a random allergy. I tried to tell myself she'd been spared, that fate had balanced the scales somehow. But deep down, I knew the truth. I'd made her collateral in a war she didn't even know existed. One night, I almost told her everything. She was sitting on the porch, scrolling through her phone, the glow lighting her face. I opened my mouth and stopped, because what would that change? It would only make her a target. Instead, I just said, "You ever feel like you're living someone else's life?" She looked up, smiled lazily. All the time. Then she went back to her screen. I envied her peace, the ignorance that looked like happiness. The next morning, a letter arrived in the mail. No sender, no return address, just my name, written in his handwriting. Inside, a single page. "I forgive you." No explanation, no accusation, just those 3 words. Forgive me for what? For switching the glasses? For surviving? For knowing? I tore the letter in half, then taped it back together. Something about destroying it felt premature, like breaking evidence before the trial. He wanted me off balance, uncertain, desperate for meaning. That was his pattern. Manipulate the narrative until guilt did the rest. Not this time. That night, I began writing my own report. Title, Project Solace, Counterface. Every note, every backup, every discrepancy documented. If he wanted to treat me like a subject, I'd become his mirror. And I'd make sure the world saw the reflection. By 3 a.m., my plan was complete. A trigger event, a public gathering, a reveal no one could spin away. But to make it work, I needed one thing only he had: access to his private archive. And to get that, I'd have to make him trust me again, which meant walking straight back into the experiment. The next morning, I made breakfast. It sounds trivial, but in our house, that was an act of surrender. Normally, he cooked on Sundays, a ritual of control disguised as family time. So when he walked in and saw me at the stove, he paused. For the first time in months, I saw genuine surprise. "Smells good," he said. "Thought I'd give Mom a break." I answered, keeping my tone light. He studied me like a scientist inspecting a lab rat that had suddenly learned to sing. Then, the faintest nod. "That's considerate." I could almost hear him recalibrating, rewriting the mental report. Subject shows cooperative behavior. During breakfast, I smiled. I laughed at his jokes. I asked about work, and every word felt like swallowing glass. But it worked. Within a few days, he began lowering his guard. He started leaving his office door unlocked again, his phone unattended during meals. At night, I heard him humming less, sleeping more soundly. He believed the experiment was stabilizing. He believed he'd won. One evening, as the sun melted behind the trees, I found him in the garden again, trimming roses, always the same gesture. "You've been different lately," he said. "In a good way." "Trying to be," I replied. He smiled, slow and satisfied. "I knew you'd come around. Family always does." It took everything in me not to respond. Instead, I handed him a cup of tea. His favorite, chamomile, honey, and just enough lemon to hide the taste of what I'd added. Not poison, I'd learned that lesson. Just something mild, harmless, valerian extract, ground into powder. Enough to make him drowsy, disoriented. A mirror version of his own methods. He drank half the cup before setting it aside. "You know," he said softly, "I almost thought I'd lost you. You never had me," I wanted to say, but out loud. "You didn't." He nodded, eyes heavy. The illusion was complete. That night, I slipped the spare key from his jacket pocket and opened his office again. Inside, the familiar smell of ink, dust, and cologne. But something new, a locked briefcase under the desk. I knew the combination before I tried it. His brother's birthday. Inside were hard drives, labeled years older than the ones I'd seen. Project Solace, preliminary. The files were older, cruder, but unmistakable. He'd started experimenting long before I was even in college. Audio notes described conditioning responses, memory anchors, compliance reinforcement. Not experiments on strangers, on us. My mother's voice, distorted by tape hiss. "Please, stop recording. He's only a child." His reply calm. "That's precisely why it matters." My stomach turned. He hadn't become a monster, he'd been practicing. I copied everything onto my encrypted drive and left the briefcase exactly as I'd found it. When I closed the office door behind me, the hallway was silent. Then I heard him. Couldn't sleep either? He was standing in the dark, tea mug still in his hand, eyes dull from drowsiness but sharp enough to wound. "Old habits," I said quickly. He stepped closer, the smile thin. "You know, I used to think you'd never understand me. But you do now, don't you?" For a second, I thought he meant it. That maybe, somewhere, there was a human thread left in him. Then he said, "I'm proud of you." He brushed past me, his hand on my shoulder, firm, approving, possessive. "Get some rest," he murmured. "Tomorrow's important." Again, that phrase. Tomorrow. I went to my room and locked the door, heart pounding, tea still burning in my nose. On my screen, the progress bar finished, 100% copied. The drive was complete. Outside, I heard him pacing once, twice, then silence. Maybe he was finally asleep. Maybe he was pretending, like me. Either way, the next move was ready. The family dinner, the perfect setting. Everyone there. Cameras. Witnesses. I shut down the computer, tucked the drive inside my jacket, and stared at my reflection in the dark window. For the first time, I saw him, his calm, his calculation, looking back at me. And I whispered, "You wanted control, Father. Tomorrow, you'll get it. But not the way you expect." The dinner was supposed to be simple. A celebration. My father's idea, of course. He said it was to honor family unity. I said yes because that's what he needed me to say. By evening, the house looked like a stage set. Candles, linen napkins, wine glasses catching the glow of the chandelier. My mother had baked the same roast she made for every milestone. My sister was filming everything for her socials, her voice bright and oblivious. It was perfect, almost too perfect. The kind of scene he loved, harmony by design. I'd prepared for every variable. The flash drive hidden in my pocket contained the video files, ready to stream from my laptop to the living room TV. I tested the connection twice. All I had to do was wait for his toast. He stood, predictable as ever, glass raised. "To family," he said. The words landed like a spell everyone was too polite to break. When they sat, I followed. "Actually," I said, forcing a small laugh, "I made something too. A memory reel." He smiled. Proud. Indulgent. "Always the filmmaker," he said. The first video played, old footage from birthdays, graduations, Christmas mornings. Normal. Harmless. I'd left it there to disarm them. Then the second clip started. The audio hissed, warped. His voice filled the room. Subject A resists conditioning. Escalation required. My sister frowned. My mother froze. My father's expression didn't move at all. He reached for the remote and pressed pause. "That's enough." "It's not." I said quietly, and hit play again. His own words spilled through the speakers, the recordings from the Solace archive. My mother's voice pleading. My father's calm replies. The documents on screen, his signature clear as daylight. He stood slowly, face drained of color, but voice steady. Turn it off. You can't control it anymore, I said. You think anyone will believe this? They don't have to. They just have to see it. For a moment, no one moved. Then he did something I hadn't planned for. He smiled. Not nervous, relieved. You really are my son, he said. And then the TV went black. I turned. The laptop screen flickered once, then froze. Password request. Drive disconnected. He'd killed the feed remotely. He knew. You broke into my work, he said softly. Do you realize what you've done? I exposed you. No, he said. You exposed yourself. He turned to my mother. See? Paranoid delusions. Fabricated evidence. He's been unstable for months. She didn't speak, but my sister did. Dad, those were your recordings. Edited, he said smoothly. Spliced together by someone who needs help. I tried to restart the laptop, but the screen showed only static and one word flashing. Locked. He'd anticipated the entire sequence. It's over, he said, voice low. Let's end this before you hurt yourself. You tried to drug me. Listen to yourself. He turned to the others. He needs rest. He's exhausted. You saw how he's been lately. The humiliation hit harder than the fear. They were hesitating. That was all he needed, hesitation. Control creeps back in through silence. I grabbed the remaining drive from my pocket. Then explain why this exists. He didn't flinch. Because I wanted you to find it. The words stopped everything. You think you're exposing me, but you're finishing what I started. Every file you copied, every password you cracked, I documented it all. Your obsession, your delusions, your aggression. It's all on record. My breath caught. He'd been recording me too. Since the moment I'd begun fighting back. My sister whispered, Dad, stop. He ignored her. This dinner, he said, was the control test. And you performed perfectly. For a second, the room tilted. I couldn't tell if it was rage or panic, but my hands were shaking. You planned this. Of course. You think chaos happens by accident. Then his voice softened again, almost tender. Let's not make this harder than it has to be. Tomorrow, we'll get you help. I'll handle the paperwork. That word again. Tomorrow. I realized he was still holding his phone, recording, streaming, maybe even calling someone. Proof of my breakdown. The laptop beeped, a single tone, and the screen briefly flashed a file recovery prompt. Playback ready. He didn't notice. I hit the key. The final clip projected to the TV before he could stop it. His voice from the night before graduation, clear, calm, unedited. If he's out of the picture, everything's clean. The words filled the room like thunder. No one moved. Even he froze. Then my sister whispered, What did you do, Dad? He opened his mouth, but no sound came. For the first time, he looked human. And I knew the war had only begun. Because monsters don't die when you expose them. They adapt. The house emptied before midnight. My sister left first, shaking, her phone clutched like a weapon she didn't know how to use. My mother lingered longer, collecting dishes no one had touched, whispering the same sentence over and over. It's all just a misunderstanding. He didn't try to stop her. He didn't try to stop anyone. When the door closed, silence flooded the room like gas. He sat at the head of the table, the same position he always claimed, staring at the dark screen of the television. The glow from the hallway light caught the sweat on his temple. The rest of his face was marble. You think this changes anything? He said. My throat was raw. Everyone heard it. They heard what I let them hear. He spoke softly, almost pitying. You still don't understand the difference between exposure and control. Control is about timing. About narrative. You had yours. Now it's mine. He stood, straightened his cuffs, and walked past me. The faint smell of his cologne, cedar and something metallic, made my stomach twist. His voice followed from the stairs. Don't do anything stupid. The police will be here in the morning. Then his door closed. For a long time I didn't move. The whole scene looked unreal. Half-empty plates, wine spilled across the tablecloth, candle wax hardened mid-drip. Evidence of a celebration that had turned into an autopsy. I went to my room and shut the door. No lock. It wouldn't have mattered anyway. He had the keys to everything. The laptop still sat on my desk, screen cracked from where he'd slammed it earlier. But when I pressed the power button, it blinked to life. A fragment of the recovered file still played, a distorted echo of his voice. Phase complete. Then static. I laughed. It sounded like someone else's voice. My reflection in the black screen looked like a stranger. Eyes red, smile crooked, exhausted and furious at once. Outside, wind rattled the window. Somewhere below, a drawer opened, then shut. Slow, deliberate. He was still awake. The fear came back in waves, but under it, something colder, cleaner. Resolve stripped of mercy. I opened my backpack, pulled out the final drive, the one I'd hidden inside a hollowed-out book. It contained the mirrored archive, the one he didn't know existed. Every file duplicated to an anonymous cloud server, timed release set for 8 a.m. If anything happened to me, the world would know. That thought should have comforted me. It didn't, because what terrified me most wasn't dying. It was becoming him. Somewhere along the line, I'd started to think like him, anticipate like him, manipulate like him. Maybe that was his last experiment, to prove I could never escape what he'd made. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. One message. Stop this. Please. Mom. I typed and erased 3 different replies before sending nothing. Some wars don't end with forgiveness. They end with exhaustion. At 2:14 a.m., footsteps again. Slower this time. He stopped outside my door. You're not my enemy, he said quietly. Then why do I feel like your project? Silence. Then a faint chuckle. Because you were supposed to be my proof that the system works. The handle turned. I held my breath. It stopped halfway. He was testing, waiting. Finally. Get some sleep, son. Tomorrow, you'll understand. His door closed again. I sat on the floor until sunrise. When light finally touched the window, I realized something simple, terrifying, and freeing. He'd already lost. Because control only works on people who still care to obey. I packed one bag, just essentials, the drive, a few clothes. Before leaving, I looked back at the dining room. The candles had melted completely, wax sealing the tablecloth like scar tissue. I thought of my sister, of my mother, of the person I used to be before all this. He could rewrite every file, delete every recording, fabricate every diagnosis. But he couldn't change that moment when his voice confessed itself to the world. That truth was permanent. As I reached for the door, I heard movement upstairs, fast, urgent. Then his voice, raw this time, breaking the calm for the first time. What did you do? The house trembled with it. I stepped outside, sunlight hitting my face, the drive warm in my pocket. And for the first time, I didn't look back. The sun was barely up when the first siren echoed down the street. It wasn't loud, not yet, just a single wail in the distance, the kind that makes the air itself tense. I was standing across the road, hidden behind the hedge line, watching the house I'd grown up in. It looked smaller now, harmless, like nothing inside could have ever destroyed anyone. But I knew better. My phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number again. Same formatting, same font. This time, only 3 words. They're here early. It wasn't a warning. It was a confession. I crossed the street just as the police car stopped in front of the gate. 2 officers got out, calm, procedural. I could see my father in the doorway, robe on, expression neutral, the picture of respectable confusion. He was performing already. Good morning, one officer said. We received an anonymous submission last night. You'll want to see this. They handed him a tablet. I saw the color drain from his face before I even reached the steps. On the screen, video files, documents, voice memos, all time-stamped, all verified, all streaming from a public archive link. The auto-upload had worked. Everything was out. This is a mistake, he said immediately, the comm cracking. Someone hacked my research account. My son, he's unwell. He's been fabricating these things. One officer scrolled, frowning. Fabricating your own voice. For the first time, his hands trembled. Those recordings are out of context. There. Then the officer hit play. If he's out of the picture, everything's clean. The same line. Now public. Irreversible. He turned toward me then. All the words he'd ever used as weapons vanished from his eyes, replaced by something I'd never seen before, genuine fear. You did this. No, I said quietly. You did. The officers asked him to step aside. He tried to argue, to call someone, to regain the rhythm of command. But control is a fragile instrument. Once it breaks, it doesn't make music anymore. My mother appeared behind him, face pale, silent. For the first time, she didn't defend him. She just said, "It's over." He stared at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. Then back at me. Do you have any idea what you've done? Yes, I said. I've finished the experiment. The police let him out. Neighbors watched from behind curtains, recording, whispering. He looked smaller with every step, not because of the handcuffs, but because the narrative had finally slipped from his control. When they drove away, the silence that followed was clean. Not heavy, just empty. My mother sat down on the steps, staring at the ground. What happens now? The truth stays out there, I said. And us. We start over. She nodded once, not as forgiveness, as acceptance. I walked to the back garden where the roses grew. The clippers still lay on the soil where he'd dropped them the night before. The air smelled of iron and damp leaves. I cut one rose, a red one, still half closed, and held it for a moment. The thorns pricked my fingers, drawing a line of blood. It felt right, a small price for closure. My phone buzzed again. A notification, archive download complete, 1.2 million views. The world had already decided its verdict. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt quiet, like something inside me had finally stopped spinning. I looked back at the house, the windows open, sunlight breaking through. For years, it had been a laboratory of lies. Now it was just wood and brick and silence. You can come home, my sister's message said. I typed back. Not yet, because home wasn't a place anymore. It was the space between truth and peace, and I wasn't ready to live there just yet. I started walking down the street, the morning light warming my face. Behind me, sirens faded. Ahead, only quiet roads and the low hum of the world moving on. For the first time, I wasn't running from anything. I was walking towards something new, undefined, uncontrollable, real. And somewhere deep down, a thought surfaced, calm, certain. He tried to poison my life, to rewrite who I was. Instead, he proved exactly what he feared most, that I'd learned from him, but not to obey. That was the real experiment, and I was the result he never expected.